If Work Smarter Not Harder was an Elden Ring build, this would be it. This build is so powerful, it's so broken that the AI is frankly not prepared for it, and it makes everything else obsolete. You don't need to dodge, you don't need to learn attack patterns, all you need to do is press 4 buttons, and those 4 buttons are L2, L1, L1, L1. So if you think you can do that, you can beat any boss in the game, especially the DLC, with zero effort whatsoever. The build takes advantage of some special mechanics that really crank your DPS, as well as your ability to tank hits. And also, at the crux of the build is Malenia's rune, which I keep hearing is the worst great rune to use. But after using it, I think it's probably the best great rune for PvE if you use this setup. So, without further ado, let's just get into it and we will start with the stats. Starting with Vigor, you need at least 60. This isn't negotiable. I know a lot of PvE build experts out there on YouTube will suggest you do less than 60. They don't know what they're talking about. You need 60 Vigor. That's all there is to say about that. Moving on, your mind can be anything. I like 14 mind because it gives you enough FP to get off all your buffs. And I'm not sure about this, but I also believe it's just enough FP to cast a full Dragon Breath spell. So if you're into that, that's another perk. But yeah, I like 14 mind. And we'll skip endurance for now. Your strength doesn't matter. Any build at the start can wield these. And then you just need to make sure you hit 12 dex for the requirement. And now getting into endurance and faith, these are the two most important stats. And the way I would level them is I would get endurance to a spot where you can wield the daggers, a sacred seal, and also have super heavy armor. For me, that's around 30 endurance. You can see I picked 31 here. And then you need to dump as many points as you can into faith. And I think a good minimum to shoot for is 63 because that allows you to wear a stat boosting helmet and equip the 2-finger heirloom talisman and get to 70 faith. And then from there, if you want to hit the soft cap of 80, you can do that with the Wondrous Physics. So 63 is a good minimum, and it still gives you the option to sort of go into a hyper mode and hit the soft cap of 80 faith if you want. But obviously, the more faith you have, the better. Now, after you've invested in faith, what you should do is dump all remaining points that you didn't want to put into faith into endurance because you need stamina. The more stamina you have, the longer the engine can run for, and that's really the only limiting factor is running out of stamina here. Moving on to talismans, these are what I like. The only thing that's really mandatory is Godskin Swaddling Cloth. It makes you heal on consecutive hits, so that's very essential as you can imagine for this build. And then I usually like to go with Rotten Wing Insignia for obvious reasons. 2 Fingers Heirloom because I do have that minimum of 63 faith here. This is a PvP build I've modified, so I'm constrained by levels. And the Erdtree Favor Talisman is kind of, just a filler talisman. You could put anything there. You could put Millicent's Talisman there if you wanted. But this is what I like. Armor is very straightforward. You want some tanky stuff and then a headpiece that boosts your faith if you're not at 80 faith already. And now we need to talk about the Erdskill daggers, which are unique in that they don't lose their physical damage scaling when you infuse them with a faith affinity buff. So what that means is if you Sacred or Flame Art infuse them, they basically keep the same scaling they were getting when they were like standard or heavy infused. But now they have like an extra 200 or 300 damage of non-physical added on top of them. So they do a really silly amount of AR when you Flame Art or Sacred infuse them. So that's what we're going to do. And what I suggest is you have 4 copies of them and you Flame Art infuse 2, Sacred infuse 2, and you respectively want to have a Flaming Strike and Endure one on Flame Art and a Sacred Blade and Endure one on Sacred. The reason for this is most enemies in PvE are weak to fire, but occasionally you get some that are resistant. If they're resistant, however, they're usually susceptible to sacred or holy damage. So by doing that, you have pretty much every weakness covered in terms of bosses. You will always do good damage. If they're resistant to one, just swap to the other. And the gameplay loop here is basically you're going to put Flaming Strike or Sacred Blade, respectively, in your left hand, Endure in your right hand. And you're going to two-hand your left-handed weapon, get the buff on the blade, and then stop two-handing so you power stance. You will walk up to a boss, you will press L2 and endure their attacks, and mash L1 3 times. You will regain most if not all of your health back from this, and then you endure again and do it all over again, and you keep doing this until the boss is no more. And if you mess up or if you need to chug a blue flask or whatever, No big deal, just pop an Endure, drink as many flasks as you need to, and then get back in there. And it's really that simple. That's all there is to it. I joke and I say I beat all these bosses on my first try, and it's usually not the case, but it's usually like my second try, third try at the most. You can see I don't have any of their attack patterns memorized or anything, because I don't need to. That's how good this build is. And we're hyper-focused on bosses, but how about something worse? How about rune bears? This build trivializes rune bears, and there's really not much to say about it. Rune bears just are not equipped to deal with Endure. You can fight 2 of them at once, no problem. It just makes rune bears a breeze. So look, if I didn't already have you sold on trying this build, certainly trivializing rune bears will do it. I want to hit one final note too before I go. If you are not on a Faith build, but you still want to do this, you can get similar results with the backhand blades, which for some incredibly silly reason have the same weight as Erdsteel daggers. They have almost the same DPS, their attacks are just a tad bit slower. They have really good HP recovery with Malenia's rune, and they have a similar, very similar, possibly even better damage split than the Erdsteel daggers. The trade-off is they're just a tad bit slower, but it's not really that noticeable. So if you're on Magic or Dex or something, you can get very similar results to the Erdsteels with backhand blades. So definitely try those out. And one last final note, the Radahn fight is a little different. Radahn is so powerful, you need defensive talismans in your slots. They're now mandatory, so you want to run the Dragon Great Shield for physical damage and the Golden Braid for holy damage for his phase 2. And on top of that, you are going to use the Iron Jar Aromatic. You'll still have to endure, but the Iron Jar just ups your physical negation by a very large amount, and it trivializes this fight. Now, if you're going to do this, I highly suggest you get Miquella's Great Rune, because you're going to be a sitting duck for the grab attack, so you need an answer to that. But if you have all those things covered, the Radahn fight will be like brainless. It'll be super easy. So in a moment, I'll leave you with the remaining footage of me cleaning up all the bosses, but I just wanted to say, I want to hear what you guys have to say about this, especially if you use this and it helped you. Please let me know in the comments, and if you don't like this, also let me know. I think that's kind of valid because this does trivialize the game, which is supposed to be a difficult game, but I think that's also what's so cool about Elden Ring, is there are so many ways to play it, and the mechanics are so detailed, and there are so many variables. People can play in a way that not even the developers really anticipate, and that's definitely what's happening here. Like, the AI is not programmed to handle this build. But nonetheless, I think that's very special that this game gives you the freedom to do something like that. So I think it's cool, and I think it's cool that this might help some people get through the DLC and help them enjoy Elden Ring more. So with that, I just want to say thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of the boss fights.